Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Parsons, and this is a presentation on chairing a dissertation committee. The reason that I'm doing this is because we've had some changes in the structure of the faculty and the level of experience with chairing. A number of people are now becoming chairs for the first time. Other people are being put on committees for the first time, and consequently, I think it's time that we had some standard guidelines and assistance to help everybody ramp up on this particular process. Now, I realize some people have experience, have been chairs before, some people have been on committees before, and some people have not been on anything to do with a dissertation before. So I'm going to kind of cover things from a very basic perspective, and I won't be able to give instructions on how to deal with every particular aspect of being a chair, but I'll certainly give you some background on how I've done it in the committees that I've been chairing. But I think the first thing, because of the nature of the audience, is to kind of look at the dissertation process from a number of different perspectives, because these are all relevant to a chair or an advisor. First of all, from the student's perspective, they finish up their regular coursework, then they take their comp exams, then they go into a series of dissertation classes. These will be DISS 01 classes, and they're standard, set up in Blackboard just the way their traditional classes are, except there won't be a particular syllabus or there won't be a particular schedule to follow, because all the different students in these classes will be working on different levels of their dissertation and on different topics. So they're, from an administrative standpoint, the students have to be enrolled in a class, and from a instructor perspective, they're going to have a class in Blackboard to take care of, but these will last up to 8 sessions, which is basically 4 semesters, so a little more than a year plus 1 semester. And if hopefully they finish their dissertation in that period of time, but if they don't, then there's another series of classes that they're enrolled in, DISS 05 extension classes. And again, as a chair, you will have those Blackboard classes, you will have your students in those classes. And then finally, at some point, hopefully they finish. So from the student's perspective, they're enrolled in these classes, and from the instructor's perspective, the chair or the advisor, they have these classes in their Blackboard library, and to a certain extent you're responsible for maintaining those classes and make sure the students are signing in regularly and so on, so from an administrative standpoint. However, from the dissertation schedule standpoint, this kind of just goes out the window, because in the dissertation schedule, things get finished when they get finished. They don't finish on a particular schedule when a particular class ends. So we have the prospectus stage, which can start as early as during regular coursework. I'm working with a student right now who's finishing up their last regular class. They have not taken their comp exam yet, but they have somewhat of a general idea about where they want to work, and so we're starting to develop the prospectus about where they might need to go. There's no reason to wait until after the comp exam to start. On the other hand, the prospectus stage, until it gets finished, may go all the way into extension. I've got a number of students in extension, deep into extension, that still don't have their prospectus finished. So they've been doing this for more than a year, more than 2 years, and they still have not completed the first stage. So this part is totally different than the regular class schedule. Once the prospectus stage is finished, then they move to the proposal stage, and again, there's no time period. The beginning and end of it are set by completion of the prospectus stage, and the finishing of the proposal stage is when the proposal is finished and defended. And then comes the dissertation phase, which again, although it looks like it's longer than the others, may be shorter than the others. There's no fixed time period, but the idea is, from the faculty's role, they're the advisor to this particular student. I'm just looking at it from one particular student and one particular faculty member right now. From the faculty member's perspective, they will be the only person working with the student during the prospectus stage. That student will be in their DISS 01 class, and then when the student passes the prospectus stage, then we assign a committee. There will be multiple committee members at that point, which will continue on through the proposal stage of the dissertation and the dissertation stage until the student either drops out or is complete, is finished. Okay. So you can see it kind of works in different ways, and many people are since they're just used to regular classes, and students are just used to regular classes, think, well, I finished my first semester, now I'm done, ready to move on to the next stage. Not if you haven't finished the prospectus. Okay, you're not going to move on until you complete the checkpoint and pass that particular set of standards to the satisfaction of not only your advisor and your committee, but also the rest of the faculty, that you're ready to move on. Okay, so we kind of have a checks and balance system here that prevents a single student and a single faculty member from pushing through an agenda to get them finished without having to pass go. Okay, so that provides kind of a basic guideline. Now I want to start at the beginning, because many people will first work as a dissertation advisor. When a student finishes their comp exam, they will get assigned into a dissertation class. That dissertation class will be assigned to a faculty member. At that point, we assume you're going to be their advisor because they're enrolled in your class, and you're now the primary contact for the student. They'll want to get in touch with you, and you'll want to get in touch with them. Phone calls, emails. Again, there's a Blackboard class, but I'll get into that a little bit later about what Blackboard is used for. And the whole objective during this particular stage, where you're their advisor, is to get them to complete the dissertation prospectus template. That's the whole goal during this point. Okay, everything else is on the side. So you want to get them to finish the template and keep them focused on that particular task. Those of you who haven't used it or aren't familiar with it, the dissertation template lays out a series of areas, okay, that need to be completed acceptably to the advisor and, in the end, to the general faculty to show that you've got the stuff you need to complete the dissertation. Okay, so there's 7 different areas to work on that need to be completed to a level of, maybe it's not finished, but it shows that there's something there. It shows that the student knows the literature in their particular area with the particular theories that they decided to work with. They also have a secondary stream of literature, and somehow they're going to tie those 2 streams together into what we've come to call the gap, but that becomes the area that their particular research is going to work. Now this has to be fairly specifically defined, because without this, who knows what's going to happen. Okay, so really you're trying to build theoretical base here. You're trying to find the area that this dissertation is going to add to the literature, add to the knowledge in the field, and define that. And then we can go on to saying, well, what does this mean your topic actually is? Okay, then the topic kind of falls out of the literature and the gap. The topic then leads to the research questions, and the research questions leads to the variables, and the variables lead to where the data is going to come from and how it's going to be analyzed. The main thing for the prospectus, and this depends on the individual and how deeply they want to get into it, is to cover the streams of literature and the gap. Okay, if those are well done and clearly defined and narrow enough so that it looks like they can be done, this provides the starting point to move on. Okay, so this is what we need to see. When the dissertation template is complete to the point that the advisor is satisfied, then it gets presented to the faculty in a meeting, and generally we look it over and talk about it and decide, is everything there that needs to be there? Are there any specific areas that look like they're going to cause problems? Where is the data going to come from? Do they think they can actually get the data to assess this research question? Are they clear on which are their dependent variables and independent variables? So again, this is kind of our checks and balance system to make sure that people don't slide through without having a pretty solid idea about where they're going next. Okay, so the template is the key. The purpose of the template, as I've kind of indicated, is to identify all the requirements, all the areas, the categories that are going to be necessary in the dissertation. If you can't identify them at this stage, how do you know you're going to be able to find them when you need them? Okay, so it kind of keeps the process in check. It also provides a standard format for everybody, all dissertation students and all faculty members, to be able to communicate and evaluate where they stand. You can sort of set a status report based upon what their prospectus looks like. If students are just simply writing kind of a freehand 1 or 2 page paper describing what they want to do, generally it will not define the literature very well. They won't narrow the literature down. They'll just be talking about a general idea that they're interested in, and it's impossible to work with that to tell them what they need to do next. So I highly recommend, I can't say you have to do it, but I highly recommend become familiar with the prospectus template, learn what it's supposed to do, use examples of those that have been passed so that you and the students know what we want on those, and then just use that as the standard communication between you and the student. Completing the checklist is the checkpoint for advancement to the next stage. We call that the prospectus stage, and they have to pass that before they go on to the proposal stage, and it becomes a working document. Okay, so you'll see many iterations of this as the student works back and forth and tries to define their streams better and tries to identify what the gap is more specifically. And this, even after the student is accepted, their template is accepted, this becomes a document that the committee uses to evaluate where the student is, and from their perspectives, what needs to be done to take this further. So the template doesn't disappear. The template becomes the foundation for everything that comes afterwards. Now this might be, again, looked at from a perspective of the dissertation process, and this is the little model I developed called two-stream literature gap model. So as the prospectus indicates, you have to have two separate streams of literature. One stream has to come from your concentration area. Okay, so if you're in marketing, you're got to be dealing with marketing. That's what your field is. That's your dissertation has to have something to do with marketing. But it can have something to do with psychology. It could have something to do with sociology. It could have something to do with politics. I mean, it could have something to do with almost anything else, but it's got to be about marketing. Then the streams, these two streams of literature, are synthesized into what's called a gap and the potential bridge, which are going to draw these two streams together. And again, we call this area here, the blue area, the prospectus stage, and this is under the supervision of a single faculty member, the advisor. When the prospectus is approved by the faculty, okay, it's presented by the advisor, but it's presented to the faculty, and if it's approved, then a committee is assigned. At that point, we move into the next phase of the process, which is called the proposal stage. And here, the advisor many times becomes the committee chairperson, not necessarily, but it happens a lot that way since they've already established a relationship with the student, and they know what the student is doing. But a couple more people, 2 or 3 more people, are generally added at this point to the committee, and the committee then guides the next phase, which is called the proposal stage. At the end of the proposal stage, then there's a defense where the student presents through a PowerPoint presentation to an audience of faculty, administrators, and so on, the information they've got so far, which is essentially the first 3 chapters of their dissertation, including the methodology section, which indicates where the data is going to come from and how they plan to analyze it. Once that's approved, then the dissertation moves into the next stage, which is the what we call the dissertation phase. But first, the IRB approval is necessary, and again, the committee chairperson is extremely important. They are the main person that communicates between the student and the committee and the IRB. So there's a strong responsibility there. And then once the approval is gained from the IRB, then we go out and start collecting the data, analyzing the data, reporting on the findings, which becomes Chapter 4 of the dissertation, and eventually summarizing the results and conclusions and looking for, what else you could have done and what can come next and so on. This we call the dissertation stage, and just like the proposal stage, the committee generally stays intact through this phase and guides the student through this particular aspect of the dissertation. At the end of this process, again, there's another defense called the final defense, and once that's completed, there's a little bit of administrative work has to come after that, but essentially the student is done, okay, and the committee is done, and the chairperson is done, and you move on to the next one. So this process works for every individual student, okay, and because they're working with different topics and they're at different stages with regards to the development of those topics, everyone is different. So unlike regular classes, the responsibilities and what you have to do is quite a bit different than simply teaching a regular class. But that shouldn't scare you. So I'll give you some tips and some ideas about at least how I've done it. Because of the way everything is organized, the chair, at least in the DBA program, as far as I've been involved in it. The chair becomes the primary contact between the committee and the university. They're responsible for setting up meetings, sometimes with the student, sometimes without the student. The chair assigns tasks. The chair really is the one who is controlling the process, establishing the requirements, saying, no, that's not good enough, we got to look at this, motivating the student, coordinating the student and the faculty and the committee members, and just basically they're the project manager, and they've got to know kind of where everything is and make sure that it's moving along at a satisfactory pace or as well as they can. The chair is also responsible for keeping all the records throughout the process. This would include keeping track of the Blackboard class, and they'll be doing grading there, different drafts of the prospectus template as it moves through the process, record what happens in the meetings with the student and the committee, when they get to the proposal, record the proposal drafts so you can keep track of those, the PowerPoint presentations, the IRB documents, the different drafts of the dissertation, the final copy. You'll be responsible, the chair is responsible for scheduling the proposal defense and the final defense and moderating that, and then they're also responsible for distributing the grand total of $1,000 for the proposal and $2,000 for the final dissertation defense among the committee members. Are there some resources? Are you just left adrift? Well, there's a DBA and DHSC handbook, okay, with basically the requirements about what's necessary and how things are going to look. This is useful for the chair, the committee members, as well as the students to have this. I have the prospectus template. It's also in the handbook, but I will, distribute that as a separate document with some more instructions and examples of what we're looking for there. I've created a bunch of videos for the dissertation, the Iron Man, the model itself, developing literature streams, developing second stream of literature and the gap, the methodology. So these are all useful. Some of them are a little redundant on each other, so once you've watched one, then you'll see similar things in the other videos. But again, these can be distributed to the students. These are good for committee members. These are good for the chair. Also, I've been working with writing, developing some videos on academic writing. Right now I have one on an overview of academic writing, and I'm putting one together on synthesizing evidence for your literature. So there are resources available. So let's talk about common problems you're likely to experience, and then I'll talk about what to do about it. Well, common problems with the student are they don't write very well. They have a hard time getting to the point. They, have completed all their classes, they've written their comp exams, they've been told they're doing okay, but now we're somehow expecting something different, something at a higher level. And it's true. Many students come through the whole process and still really can't write at an academic doctoral level. So you're going to have to work with that. And there are some resources I can provide that'll help you get them on the right track there. Many times students, because they're not under a real specific schedule, just disappear. They go off and they say they're going to work on something or have something to you in a couple weeks, and a couple months later they still haven't written anything. You have to keep after them, but they come up with all kinds of excuses, jobs, families, medical issues that stop them from being able to work very quickly. And I think that's a problem, because the longer the gaps are between their actual work on the dissertation, the more difficult it is for them to get started again, because they don't remember where they were. But it will happen. We find some students are not very good in the library. They can find obvious things, but they can't do in-depth research. Some of them are kind of stubborn. They have ideas in their head about what their dissertation is going to be about. They've had that idea since they even entered the program, and they do not want to follow the prospectus template because they can't find the literature to go along with their topic. And you've got to convince them that they have to follow the procedure, and the prospectus template is the first thing they have to do. Some of them just have been at this a long time, and for some reason just can't grasp the nature of a dissertation. They think it's going to be a report on something. It's like going to be an article in the New York Times or in the Wall Street Journal. They're going to talk about things, they're going to talk to some people, and then they're going to write it all up. and they don't get the idea of original research. They don't get the idea of it's going to be based upon accepted theory and accepted published literature. Somehow it takes a long time for them to give up their old idea and understand what they have to do. There are also common problems with the committee. Sometimes the committee just doesn't pay enough time and attention to the process. They don't respond quickly to things, and I think this kind of stems from the idea is they don't feel like it's their responsibility as much as the chair's responsibility, and if they don't feel like doing it, then eventually the chair is going to do it and it'll get done. Okay, so it's just like working with a team in any other situation. You got to work with those people, make them understand, that they have responsibilities, try to keep them involved. So how to deal with it? Well, let's talk about the students first. Don't let the students control the process. The chair controls the process, and the process is the prospectus template. So they have to have these various parts of the template to a satisfactory level, that means they've got what they need to advance. If they don't do that, they can't advance. No matter how many pages they write about things that don't have anything to do with their topic, that don't show any knowledge of the literature whatsoever, no matter how many pages they write, until they write the prospectus template, and it doesn't have to be 20, 30, 40 pages long. It can be well done, and I would say less than 10 pages, as long as they focus on the things that are necessary and don't get sidetracked. But that's what they need to do. The chair also has to make sure, and I've learned this through experience, that I don't look at stuff the students turn in unless it's been sent to the writing studio first, because just a lot of times they're not paying attention, they're not conscientious enough about their writing, and they turn in things that you would think, what do they think they're doing? This is academic doctoral level work, and they have grammar and spelling errors. It's not organized well. It's difficult to understand what they're saying. So at this point, I don't proofread and tell them how to write their papers. I leave that up to the writing studio. Also, I find it useful to use examples. The students many times don't really understand what you want until they see a good one. So you give them a sample prospectus template, you give them a sample proposal, you show them accepted defense presentations. You also invite them when there is a defense or a proposal or a dissertation defense. Make sure they get that announcement so they can go and see, how it's done. I always require a status report at the end of each term because I have to give them a grade. So even though they may have not turned in the next draft of the prospectus or the proposal, I still want to know where they stand, what they've accomplished. If I don't get a status report, or it looks like they haven't done anything, then they get an NC, no credit. If it looks like they've done something, if it looks like they're making progress, they get a CR. And if you're unsure, you give them an I. And again, this is the chair's responsibility because you're dealing with a Blackboard class. Some students work well on their own. They're dedicated and they turn things around quickly. Some don't, but some don't respond well to reminders. They don't return phone calls. So you're just going to have to deal with a variety of situations on an individual basis. I would say the most important thing is to build up a relationship with the student because you're going to be with them for a long time. Establish a working relationship that is supportive, but make them sure that if they're not going to outweight you, they're not going to just, I've been here for 5 years, I should have a dissertation. And I say, well, yes, you should have a dissertation, but you don't get it until it's done. So you got to be like a parent, really. You got to have established standards and be supportive. But it's their dissertation; they've got to do the work. They can be there a long time, and if they don't work at it, it's not going to get done. For working with the committee, I've got some other recommendations. I try to share information, so I always use reply all in the email, so everybody on the committee knows what's going on. I hold conference calls with committee members when we want to talk about a new document. Generally, I wait until there's something to actually talk about, as opposed to just getting together to talk about general issues. I'm more of like the written communication. So when a student sends me something new, then I'll review it, and then I'll call them up, and then we'll talk about what they've sent me. But to call them up and just talk about not, kind of abstract things and be supportive, to me, kind of leads you open to many different confusions. So I generally work off something that's been written. I also try to clarify responsibilities to make everybody on the committee know what I expect from them and when I expect it. But I also encourage various viewpoints, so I have committee members review the prospectus template, review the proposal, do it individually, and send me your individual comments, perspectives, and then before I send it back to the student, I will normally integrate it and summarize it so the student feel like they're getting, one viewpoint and one set of recommendations. And this is important because if you have different committee members talking to the student individually at different times, they may be telling them something different than the party line. So I think from my perspective, it's better to avoid confusion than it is to provide multiple perspectives, which may cause a student to not know who to listen to. It's not that I never allow the committee members to talk to the student directly. If there's a specific thing that that committee member could be very helpful with, sure, that just speeds up the communication process. But in general, I think it kind of the responsibility of the chair is to kind of filter and control the information as it goes to the student. Also, I believe in responding quickly, and I try to get my committee members to respond quickly also. So this has been about chairing a dissertation committee, and I've tried to provide a kind of a broad perspective on the whole process, as well as some of the things you're likely to encounter, as well as some of the things that I found to be useful in managing the process. But it's necessary. If you have a doctoral program, you have to have committee chair people. It's, a bad job, but somebody's got to do it. And it's not necessarily a bad job, but it is a significant responsibility, and you've got to carve out time in your schedule to take it seriously and do what needs to be done. I would have to say it's not always enjoyable for a variety of different reasons, and it's not always appreciated by the student or the faculty or the university. But again, it's something that has to be done. And it does become satisfying when you see progress being made and the student completes their prospectus and you are able to send them the announcement, the faculty accepted your prospectus, you can now move on. And you get this, overwhelming sigh of relief or celebration. I had students write back and said they started crying, uncontrollably crying, when they heard their prospectus was accepted because they've been working at it so long. And the same is true when the proposal is accepted and the defense is accepted, and of course when the dissertation is accepted and the dissertation defense is accepted. So, it's something that's got to be done. It does take time and a level of responsibility for it. These students are paying their money. They're going to the classes. They expect to get something in return, but they're the ones that have to write the dissertation. It's not always going to seem like it's something you want to spend your time doing when you got other things to do, and you don't always feel that people appreciate what you're doing. However, in the end, it's got to be done, and there are intrinsic rewards that come along with it. Well, I've talked long enough. Certainly know who I am and can get back in touch with me via email or phone call. But I'll let you go now, and goodbye, and good luck with your chairing.